Naomi was a young woman full of love, kindness, and devotion. She had grown up in a simple home, raised to believe in respect, hard work, and the beauty of marriage. When she married Zuberi, the eldest son of a respected family in the village of Zimbele, she believed she was stepping into a life of love and companionship. She dreamed of building a happy home with her husband, where she would be cherished and embraced as a daughter by his family. But the moment she stepped into her new home, she felt the coldness in the air. Mama Jelani, Zuberi's mother, was a strong and controlling woman who ruled the household with an iron grip. To her, Naomi was not good enough for her son. She had expected Zuberi to marry someone from a wealthier family, someone who could bring status and honor to their name. But instead, he had chosen Naomi, a girl with nothing but her kind heart. From the first day, Mama Jelani made it clear that Naomi was not welcome. She spoke to her in a harsh tone, ignored her presence, and made her feel like an outsider in her own home. Naomi tried her best to win her mother-in-law's love. She woke up early, prepared meals, and performed every duty expected of a good wife and daughter-in-law. But no matter what she did, Mama Jelani always found a reason to criticize her. "You are too slow," she would say. "You don't know how to cook properly. You are not fit to be the wife of my son." The words stung, but Naomi swallowed her pain, hoping that one day her kindness would soften the old woman's heart. Zuberi, the man she had trusted with her heart, remained silent. He loved his mother deeply and was afraid to challenge her. Whenever Naomi looked at him for support, he simply lowered his eyes and said nothing. His silence hurt her more than his mother's words. She had married a man who would not defend her, who would rather see her suffer than go against his mother's wishes. Despite the pain, Naomi held on to hope. She believed that if she continued to endure, if she showed patience and respect, things would change. But she had no idea that her struggles were only just beginning. Each morning before the sun even rose, Naomi was already awake, her hands busy with work. Mama Jelani had taken full control of her life, giving her endless tasks that left her exhausted by nightfall. She scrubbed the floors until her fingers ached, fetched water from the well multiple times a day, and cooked meals for the entire household without a single word of appreciation. The moment she finished one task, Mama Jelani would find another, never letting her rest. "You are a wife now," Mama Jelani would say sharply. "This house must shine, and the food must be ready on time. No lazy women will live under my roof." Naomi obeyed without complaint, believing that if she proved herself hard-working and respectful, her mother-in-law would eventually accept her. But no matter how much she did, it was never enough. If the food was too salty, Mama Jelani would scowl and call her useless. If the floor had a single speck of dust, she would shake her head in disappointment. Zuberi saw everything. He watched as Naomi worked from dawn to dusk, as she grew thinner and more tired with each passing day. But he never spoke up. He feared his mother's anger, the weight of her expectations pressing heavily on him. He had always been taught that a man must respect his mother above all else. Speaking against her was unthinkable. So, whenever Naomi looked at him with tired, pleading eyes, hoping for his support, he simply lowered his gaze and walked away. Despite the cruelty, Naomi held on. She told herself that things would change, that one day Mama Jelani would see her worth, and Zuberi would finally stand by her side. She had promised to be a good wife, and she would keep that promise, no matter how much it hurt. The humiliation began in small, cruel ways. Whenever visitors came to the house, Mama Jelani made sure Naomi was the one serving them. She would watch closely, waiting for the smallest mistake. If Naomi spilled a little tea or placed a plate slightly out of line, Mama Jelani would shake her head dramatically and sigh. "This girl is useless," she would say, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I warned my son not to marry a woman who can't even serve guests properly." The visitors would chuckle awkwardly, some looking at Naomi with pity, others nodding in agreement. Naomi's face burned with shame, but she bit her tongue and kept serving, refusing to let the tears fall. As time went on, the insults became harsher. Mama Jelani compared her to other women in the village, saying how they were better, more hard-working, more respectful. "Look at Lusayo, the daughter of Chief Muntu," she would say. "Elegant, from a good family. That is the kind of woman my son deserves, not a girl who brings shame to this house." But the worst betrayal came during a family gathering. The house was filled with relatives, laughter, and the rich smell of food. Everyone was seated, talking, and enjoying the meal when Mama Jelani suddenly cleared her throat. The room fell silent as she turned to Zuberi, her expression serious. "My son," she said, her voice dripping with authority. "It is time to make a choice. Either you listen to your mother, or you stay with this woman who brings nothing but shame to our family." A real man knows where his loyalty lies. The entire room turned to Zuberi, waiting for his response. Naomi's heart pounded in her chest. She stared at her husband, hoping, praying that he would stand up for her, that he would finally tell his mother to stop. But Zuberi said nothing. He lowered his head, his hands gripping the edge of the table, his lips pressed tightly together. He did not defend her. He did not even look at her. Something inside Naomi broke. She had endured the chores, the insults, the humiliation. But this silence, this betrayal from the man who had promised to love and protect her was too much. She felt her eyes sting with tears, but she forced herself to stay strong. She would not cry in front of these people. Mama Jelani smirked, satisfied. She had won. And Naomi, for the first time, realized she was completely alone in this house. The days stretched endlessly for Naomi, each one harder than the last. From the moment the sun rose, she was on her feet, sweeping, cooking, washing clothes, and running errands. Mama Jelani made sure she had no time to rest, always finding something new for her to do. "A lazy woman has no place in this house," she would say, handing Naomi another basket of clothes to scrub. The work was exhausting, but the worst part was the hunger. Mama Jelani controlled all the food in the house and decided who deserved to eat. Naomi, in her eyes, did not. If she dared to take even a small portion, Mama Jelani would scowl at her. "You do not contribute to this family's wealth, so why should you eat from it?" she would sneer. "If you are hungry, work harder." At first, Naomi tried to endure. She forced herself to keep going, hoping that if she worked hard enough, her mother-in-law would finally accept her. But her body had limits. The lack of food made her weak, and the endless labor drained her energy. She started feeling lightheaded often, her vision blurring when she bent down to wash the floors. One afternoon, as she carried a heavy basket of firewood, she felt her knees tremble. A sharp dizziness hit her, and before she could steady herself, she collapsed onto the ground. The pain from the fall shot through her body, but no one rushed to help. Mama Jelani simply looked at her from the doorway and scoffed. "Pathetic," she muttered before turning away. Zuberi saw what was happening. He saw his wife growing weaker, saw the dark circles under her eyes, saw how she swayed on her feet, but he did nothing. Whether out of fear or blind loyalty to his mother, he stayed silent. Naomi tried to hide her suffering. She didn't want to appear weak, didn't want to give Mama Jelani another reason to call her useless, but deep inside, she was breaking. No matter how much she tried, nothing was ever enough. Mama Jelani was not satisfied with just making Naomi's life difficult. She wanted her gone. In her eyes, Naomi was a burden, a weak woman who had no place in their home. But she knew that forcing Zuberi to abandon his wife would take careful planning. So, she began planting seeds of doubt in his mind. "Zuberi, open your eyes," she would say in a soft, concerned voice. "Naomi is bringing nothing but bad luck to this house. Look at how weak she is. A strong wife should bring prosperity, not misery." At first, Zuberi resisted. He had chosen Naomi after all. But Mama Jelani was relentless. She pointed out every little thing, twisting the truth until Zuberi started believing that Naomi was the problem. When Naomi fell sick, instead of worrying about her, Zuberi saw it as a sign of her weakness. "She cannot even take care of herself," Mama Jelani whispered. "How can she take care of a household?" Slowly, Zuberi's attitude began to change. He stopped looking at Naomi with love. His words became cold, his presence distant. Then, Mama Jelani took the next step. She invited Lusayo, the daughter of a wealthy trader, to visit their home. Lusayo was everything Mama Jelani wanted in a daughter-in-law. Rich, confident, and eager to please. She showered Zuberi with attention, laughing at his jokes, praising his strength, and making him feel important. Mama Jelani watched as her son slowly warmed up to Lusayo, and she smiled, knowing her plan was working. Naomi noticed the change in Zuberi. He no longer spoke to her unless necessary. He stopped defending her, stopped noticing her pain. He came home late, spent less time with her, and when he did, he barely acknowledged her presence. It was as if she no longer existed in his world. Each day, Naomi felt more invisible. She was still in the house, still doing all the work, still enduring Mama Jelani's cruelty, but now she was truly alone. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted, had turned his back on her, and worst of all, he didn't even realize it. One afternoon, as Naomi was scrubbing the courtyard floor, she heard a familiar voice calling her name. She looked up and saw Casey, her childhood friend, standing at the gate. It had been so long since she had seen a friendly face, and for a moment, she felt like crying. Kessie's eyes widened in shock when she saw Naomi. The girl she once knew was now thin, pale, and exhausted. Her clothes hung loosely on her fragile frame, and her once bright eyes were dull with sadness. "Naomi, what has happened to you?" Kessie rushed forward, taking Naomi's hands in hers. Naomi forced a small smile, pretending everything was fine, but Kessie could see the truth. She could see the pain, the hunger, the exhaustion written all over Naomi's face. Kessie insisted on sitting with her, away from Mama Jelani's sharp eyes. As they talked, Naomi tried to brush off her struggles, saying she was just tired from housework, but Kessie was not convinced. "This is not just tiredness, Naomi," she said firmly. "You look unwell. Have you seen a doctor?" Naomi shook her head. There had never been time for that. Kessie felt anger rise inside her. How could Naomi's husband and mother-in-law let her suffer like this? She would not stand by and watch her friend waste away. "Enough is enough," Kessie said. "You are coming with me to see Elder Mzinga. He will know what is wrong." At first, Naomi hesitated. She knew Mama Jelani would be furious if she left the house. But as she looked into Kessie's determined eyes, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone still cared. And maybe, for the first time, she needed to care for herself too. Kessie held Naomi's hand tightly as they walked to Elder Mzinga's small clinic at the edge of the village. The old doctor was known for his wisdom and kindness, and many people trusted him with their lives. When they arrived, he took one look at Naomi and frowned. He could see the weakness in her steps, the hollowness in her cheeks, and the way her hands trembled from exhaustion. Without wasting time, he led her inside and asked her to sit down. He carefully examined her, asking questions about her daily life, her meals, and her health. Naomi answered truthfully, though shame filled her heart. She didn't want to admit that she was often denied food, that she worked all day without rest, and that no one in her home cared if she was sick. Elder Mzinga listened silently, his face dark with concern. When he was done, he let out a deep sigh and shook his head. "My child," he said gently, "you are suffering from severe malnutrition and dehydration. Your body is weak because you have not been eating enough, and your strength is fading because you are being overworked. If this continues, you may not survive." The words struck Naomi like a heavy blow. She had known she was unwell, but hearing it so plainly made her heart sink. Kessie's eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed Naomi's hand. "We need to do something," she said urgently. "She cannot go on like this." Elder Mzinga nodded. "She needs proper food, rest, and care. If she does not receive it, her condition will only get worse." Determined to make Zuberi understand the seriousness of the situation, Kessie and Elder Mzinga went to inform him. When Zuberi heard the diagnosis, he frowned but said nothing. Instead, he glanced at his mother, waiting for her reaction. Mama Jelani scoffed and waved her hand dismissively. "Nonsense," she said. "She is just lazy, always looking for attention." Zuberi, as always, remained silent, unwilling to go against his mother's words. His hesitation cut through Naomi like a knife. Even now, when her life was at risk, he refused to stand up for her. The little hope she had left started to fade, but deep inside, a new feeling was growing, one she had never felt before. A quiet but firm realization that she could not continue living like this. The sun blazed high in the sky as Naomi struggled to carry a heavy basket of vegetables through the busy marketplace. Her body ached, her vision blurred, and her legs felt like they could barely hold her up. She had eaten little in days, and exhaustion clung to her like a heavy cloak, but she pushed forward, determined to complete the errand Mama Jelani had forced upon her. As she walked, the noise of the market faded into the background. Her heart pounded in her chest, and suddenly, the ground beneath her seemed to shift. She swayed, her fingers losing their grip on the basket. Then, everything went dark. Gasps filled the air as Naomi collapsed onto the dusty road. Fruits and vegetables scattered around her, but she was too weak to move. Strangers rushed to her side, some fanning her, others calling for help. Murmurs of concern spread through the market, and soon a small crowd had gathered. Not far away, Mama Jelani and Zuberi stood watching. "Leave her," Mama Jelani said coldly. "She's just pretending, always looking for pity." Zuberi shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. He simply turned away, as if his own wife lying unconscious on the ground was not his concern. Kessie, who had been nearby, came running the moment she heard the commotion. When she saw Naomi lying helpless, her heart clenched with fear. Pushing through the crowd, she dropped to her knees beside her friend and gently lifted her head. "Naomi, can you hear me?" she whispered. Naomi's eyelids fluttered open slightly, but she was too weak to speak. Without wasting another second, Kessie called for help and, with the help of kind strangers, carried Naomi back to Elder Mazinga's clinic. When Elder Mazinga saw her, his face darkened with worry. He checked her pulse, examined her frail body, and sighed heavily. "This cannot continue," he said firmly. "She will not survive much longer in that household. If she does not leave, she will die." Casey clenched her fists. "Then she must leave," she said with determination. "Even if she has nowhere to go, she cannot stay where she is suffering." Elder Mazinga nodded. "She deserves a life where she is valued, where she is cared for." Naomi, though weak, heard every word. A single tear slipped down her cheek. For the first time, she truly understood. If she wanted to live, she had to walk away from the place that was killing her. Naomi lay in bed at Elder Mazinga's clinic, her body still weak but her mind clearer than ever before. She had spent years enduring pain, humiliation, and neglect. But now, she realized something. She didn't have to stay in that life. She didn't have to keep suffering. If Zuberi wouldn't fight for her, she would fight for herself. With a deep breath, she turned to Kessie, who had been by her side through everything. "I want to leave," Naomi whispered, her voice fragile but firm. Kessie's eyes filled with relief. "Then we leave, Naomi. You don't have to go back there ever again." The very next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Kessie helped Naomi pack her few belongings. They left quietly, slipping away before Mama Jelani or Zuberi could stop them. The journey was long, but Kessie knew exactly where to take Naomi, to her uncle's home in Mugano, a peaceful village far from Zimbabwe. When they arrived, Kessie's uncle, Baba Tembo, welcomed them with open arms. He had a kind face, filled with wisdom and warmth. "You are safe here, Naomi," he said. "Rest, heal. You are not alone anymore." For the first time in years, Naomi felt the weight of fear lift from her shoulders. In Baba Tembo's home, she was treated with kindness. She was given warm food, a soft bed, and most importantly, respect. Day by day, she regained her strength. Her body healed, and so did her heart. One afternoon, as she sat outside watching the village women weave colorful baskets, Baba Tembo's wife, Mama Rina, handed her a bundle of palm fronds. "Try, child," she said gently. "Your hands are steady. You will learn." At first, Naomi struggled, but Mama Rina guided her patiently. Soon, she found comfort in the rhythm of weaving. It was peaceful, almost like a kind of healing. She spent hours creating patterns, perfecting her craft. And before long, people in the village began to notice her work. They praised her skill, and soon her baskets were in demand. What started as a simple way to pass the time became something greater. Naomi's baskets were not just beautiful, they were strong, crafted with the same resilience that now filled her heart. For the first time in her life, Naomi had something of her own. She was no longer just a wife, a daughter-in-law, or a victim. She was Naomi, the woman who had survived, healed, and found a new purpose. Mama Jelani, once a woman full of power and authority, now lay weak and helpless in her bed. Her body, once strong enough to control the household with an iron grip, had turned against her. She suffered from endless pain, unable to move without assistance. The same servants she used to command with harsh words now only helped her out of obligation, not love. Zuberi, who had once blindly followed his mother's every word, now found himself drowning in problems. Without Naomi, the household had fallen into chaos. Chores were left undone, meals were never on time, and the warmth that once filled their home was gone. He had never realized how much Naomi had held everything together until she was no longer there. On top of that, his financial situation had worsened. The business that once thrived under his father's guidance was now struggling under his management. Mama Jelani had spent so much time interfering in his life that she had never taught him how to handle responsibilities. Now, with her sick and weak, he had no one to guide him. Then came Lusayo, the woman his mother had desperately wanted him to marry. At first, she had seemed perfect, charming and elegant. But when she noticed the household falling apart and the financial struggles becoming worse, she didn't hesitate to leave. "I can't live like this, Zuberi," she said coldly. "I thought you were a strong man, but you are nothing without your mother's control. I deserve better." And just like that, she walked away, leaving him in shock. For the first time in his life, Zuberi felt completely alone. The mother who had controlled his every decision could no longer help him, and the woman she had chosen for him had abandoned him. He sat in the empty house, staring at the walls, realizing how badly he had failed. The woman who had truly loved him, the one who had cared for him despite everything, was gone. And now, He had no way to bring her back. Zuberi could no longer ignore the emptiness in his heart. The house that once felt like a place of control and authority now felt cold and lifeless. He had lost everything. His mother was bedridden, his business was failing, and the woman he had chosen over Naomi had abandoned him without a second thought. The weight of his mistakes pressed down on him, and for the first time, he saw the truth clearly. Naomi had been the light in his life, and he had let it fade away. Desperate to make things right, he asked around the village, searching for any news about Naomi. When he finally learned that she had moved to Mugano, he wasted no time. He traveled for hours, his heart pounding with a mix of guilt and hope. He had no idea what he would say to her, but he knew he had to see her. When he arrived in Mugano, he was stunned by what he saw. Naomi was no longer the weak and exhausted woman he had left behind. She stood tall, her face glowing with health and confidence. She was surrounded by people who respected her, and her weaving business had flourished. Women gathered around her, learning from her, and customers lined up to buy her beautiful fabrics. She had built a new life, one that had nothing to do with him. Zuberi felt ashamed as he approached her. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Naomi, I was wrong. I was blind. I let my mother control me, and I didn't protect you. I know I don't deserve it, but please, forgive me." His eyes were filled with regret, his shoulders heavy with sorrow. "Come back home with me," he pleaded. "I need you." Naomi looked at him, her expression unreadable. For so long she had wished for these words, but now that they had come, she wasn't sure if they still meant anything to her. The man standing before her was not the Zuberi she had once loved. He was a broken man, lost and desperate, and for the first time, she realized that she was no longer the same Naomi either. Naomi took a deep breath and looked Zuberi in the eyes. There was no anger in her voice, no bitterness, only a quiet strength. "I will not go back," she said firmly. "I have found my worth, and I will never let anyone take it away from me again." Zuberi's face fell, his eyes pleading, but she did not waver. "You stood by and watched as your mother humiliated me," she continued. "You let her break me, and when I needed you the most, you turned away. I begged for your love, your protection, but you chose silence." Zuberi lowered his head in shame. He had no excuse, no words to defend himself. He knew she was right. Back in Zimbele, Mama Jelani lay in her bed, weak and helpless. The once powerful woman who had controlled everything now had no one by her side. Her health had failed her, and the people she had mistreated had long turned their backs on her. She finally understood the weight of her actions, but it was too late. As Naomi walked away, leaving Zuberi standing in the dust, she felt no sadness, only peace. She had survived, she had grown, and now she was truly free. Naomi remained in Mugano, where she continued to grow her weaving business. What started as a simple craft had now become a thriving trade, and she used her success to help other women who had suffered similar fates. She provided them with work, taught them skills, and gave them a safe space to rebuild their lives. For the first time, Naomi felt truly free, surrounded by people who valued and respected her. Meanwhile, back in Zimbabwe, Zuberi and Mama Jelani lived in deep regret. Zuberi, once proud and confident, was now a broken man. Lusayo had left him, taking whatever wealth she could before vanishing. His household was in ruins, and no one came to his aid. Mama Jelani, once feared and respected, was now weak and bedridden, with no one to care for her. The villagers whispered about them, shaking their heads as they passed the once grand house. "Karma has come for them," they said. But Naomi no longer thought about the past. She had built a new life, one filled with purpose and happiness. She had learned the most important lesson of all. True strength comes from knowing your worth, and no one had the power to take that away from her again. Love and respect should never be taken for granted. Naomi gave her heart and devotion to Zuberi, but he failed to appreciate her. He allowed his mother to mistreat her, believing that he would always have control over her life. In the end, he learned a painful lesson. When love is not valued, it will slip away, never to return. A person's worth is not measured by wealth or status, but by their actions. Mama Jelani believed that money and family reputation made her superior, but her cruelty only led to her downfall. Naomi, on the other hand, was a simple woman with a kind heart. Even when she had nothing, she treated others with love and respect. That kindness eventually brought her success and happiness, proving that true wealth lies in character, not possessions. Karma always finds a way to balance life's scales. Mama Jelani spent years controlling and mistreating others, but in the end, she was left helpless and alone. Zuberi turned his back on Naomi, only to be abandoned himself. Meanwhile, Naomi, who endured so much pain, was rewarded with a new life filled with happiness and purpose. What you give to the world always comes back to you, whether good or bad.